Hi, I'm Richard, the founder of 10 Adventures, and this is the 10 Adventures podcast. Each week we talk to real people about real adventures as they explore this incredible planet we all live on. On this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast, we're going to hear about an epic canoeing adventure that took 3 years to cross from Vancouver to Sydney, Nova Scotia. With us today are Carol VandenEngel and Glenn Green, who undertook this enormous journey to raise money for Canoe for Change. Hi, Carol and Glenn.
Good morning, Richard.
Hello.
First off, how do you come up with an idea to canoe across Canada? I remember reading about the voyageurs and the trappers for the Hudson Bay going down to, Hudson Bay or Montreal every autumn. But I never thought I'm going to try and do a similar journey. You guys did. What started this incredible idea?
Richard, Carol and I are no strangers to the outdoors. We enjoy being outdoors. We enjoy hiking, snowshoeing, backpacking, skiing, anything that gets us outdoors. We've done many trips over the years that have taken us out of the country. We've hiked in Portugal, into the Grand Canyon, and in one instance, we were hiking in the Mojave Desert, and during this hike, a sandstorm came up and blew down our tent. So it was early in 2017, and we came to the realization our real passion, and it always has been and always will be, is paddling. And we thought, why are we walking through sandstorms when we can be on the water and paddling? So we started with this thought, and we said, we got to make it a reality. Let's do it an epic canoe trip, and let's go across Canada. So we put the wheels in motion. We retired early, and then we proceeded to do the planning for this big adventure.
Wow. And had you ever done a paddling trip that even approached, this long? What had been your longest trip before embarking on this?
Well, prior to this, we probably have been out the longest 14, 20 days. So this was of significant magnitude and logistics to put together.
And so for people who maybe aren't familiar with, how big Canada is, how long, like how many kilometers did you guys paddle to undertake this journey?
Yeah, this trip for us was 8,515 kilometers, and we did it over the course of 3 years. We started in 2017. It was Canada's celebration of 150th year in Confederation. So we decided it would be fitting to leave from the nation's capital of Ottawa and paddle east to Sydney, Nova Scotia. The following year, 2018, we loaded up our gear and our canoe and put ourselves on the train and headed out to Vancouver, did our first major portage through Pacific Union Station in Vancouver, and paddled as far as the season would take us before winter encroached, and that was Fort Frances, Ontario. And then in 2019, we took up the charge, starting out at Fort Frances, paddled back to Ottawa, and then subsequently we had to paddle back home to Kingston, which is south of Ottawa, for those listening and viewing that want a geography outline of where we are. We're in Kingston, Ontario here.
And so the first question I thought of when I first heard of your journey is, how did you get over the Rockies? I realized now, I saw some photos on your site, but can you just tell us how you went over this, 1,000 kilometers of mountain ranges that kind of go between Vancouver and Calgary?
Surprising, not a lot of people put that question to us. But excellent question. Yeah, so before we left, we knew the logistics and what was ahead of us. But we wanted to make it a true coast-to-coast paddle on our own steam, however we did it. We made it with our canoe to Hope, British Columbia, where we pre-arranged before we left to acquire a couple of used mountain bikes. Even though we did this paddle coast to coast, this is our retirement cruise. So we wanted to see Canada and enjoy as much as we could and do some things and cross them off our bucket list that have always been sitting there. So with the acquisition of these mountain bikes, we decided to put our canoe in storage to retrieve it later, but we were going to cycle the Kettle Valley Rail Trail system. And it's a recreational trail. Used to be a former railway line, but it's converted for recreational use. And then we cycled to Nelson, British Columbia, where we went and retrieved our canoe to start paddling from Nelson. So we actually more or less walked over the Rocky Mountains. And breaking it down, it was how many K?
Yeah, we bicycled for about 400K and paddled for I think about 300, and then about 400 kilometers of walking. So we went through Crow's Nest Pass, got to the top of the Great Divide, and then it was downhill all the way to Alberta.
Yeah.
So that took a number of weeks to do that. It took us a long time to get across BC, but we knew that. So it was a challenge. We had lots of blisters on our feet, went through a pair of sandals and shoes.
Yeah.
Because we were pushing and pulling so much weight. We were pushing and pulling about 240 pounds of supplies in our canoe. So we had all our gear loaded in the canoe, and we just did it that way because we really wanted to cross Canada on our own steam. So that's how we did it.
And we were really happy to reach that continuous water source in Alberta.
Cool off our blistered feet in the water.
It reminds me of these Antarctic explorers that would be, hauling these sledges to the South Pole. It just must have been, on hot days, just, really tough. Like, how many kilometers would you go in a day when you're actually hauling or pushing the canoe?
We had to work into it. So the average probably we tried to do was 20 kilometers, and it was a bonus if we did more. And even if we did less, it didn't really matter. We weren't really in a hurry. So that's about it.
Yeah. It was one step at a time. Just put one foot in front of the other, and you can't complain or you can't grumble. You just put up with it and do it.
We became kind of a novelty on the highway, when we were going over Crow's Nest Pass, because people would be driving back and forth to work, and then the people would slow down their car and they would just look, and we always waved. Didn't matter who it was, we always waved. And then we'd see them coming back from work. They would, wave back, and then the next day we would see them, and then they would continue to wave, and then the day after we would see them. Now they're honking and waving.
And eventually they'd stop and say, "What are you doing? Where are you going?"
Yeah. And
I've seen you for days on the road.
And they would bring us coffee or fruit or, muffins and cookies. And so they became part of our family almost.
And then obviously, you have some big descents in coming out of the Rockies. I've done a little bit of whitewater canoeing in my life, but never with a 250-pound weighted down canoe. What was it like going down some of these rapids in, a really full canoe?
We're not whitewater people, so we tend to stay on the flat, easy water because we didn't want to have any mishaps. And so we were very careful on how we navigated and what we navigated.
As you went out of the Rockies, my kind of view is it's, pretty flat all the way out to Ontario. Is that actually what it is, or what's it like for someone who's canoed that entire section?
We did the research before we left, and we didn't realize this because my perception of the prairies was it was flat, barren, went for miles without any vistas. But along the Old Man, the South Saskatchewan, which came into the Saskatchewan River, it was just like a gorge cut through the prairies. I never knew this existed, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to experience it and see it. And with the coulees and the canyons, it was quite breathtaking, and never a dull moment. There was always great scenery to see and wildlife that were abundant along the shoreline.
And so once you got over the mountains, what was a typical day on the water for you?
So a typical day on the water, we usually got up with the sun, and we always made time to have a cup of coffee in our little camp chairs and watch the sun come up. From the time we would get up in the morning to the time we got into our canoe took about an hour and a half. So we would have breakfast and pack up. We had quite the routine going, and every day it was the same basically. And then we'd hit out in the water. So we never really had a typical day. Sometimes it was always windy, but sometimes we had calm weather and we could make great distance. The average, I would think, of paddling in one day would be about 8 hours, and we would cover, depending on the wind and the conditions, anywhere from 6 kilometers to 60 kilometers. So average maybe 30, something like that, when we were out in the water. Sure enough, at lunchtime when we were ready to have a little break, we always saw a perfect place to camp, but it was always too early, so we had to keep going. And by the end of the day, we would look for a spot to camp. And this was something that I was really concerned about before we left, because I thought, where on earth are we ever going to camp, all the way across Canada? But it wasn't really a worry once we got started, because we always found a spot to camp on the side of the river, on a lake, even in the city. We camped in city parks, and sometimes it was on private property, but we would always ask before. We'd see if we could find someone that was a landowner, so we would ask permission. And then we cooked up our fantastic meal of dehydrated food, and usually went to bed when the sun went down.
And that was a necessity because you were just exhausted from the day. Mm-hmm. But Richard, we practiced no trace camping. Wherever we were, it was cleaner when we left than when we got there. Absolutely.
I think that's a really important part. I know here in the last few years in the Rockies, as people have been getting into the outdoors, it seems that message is being lost, and you go into some backcountry campgrounds and it's, beer cans and trees have been ripped down and partially burned. And it's really sad to see, because, the reason we all love nature is because it's so clean and pristine, and to see some people go and destroy it is really tragic. I'm interested in your dehydrating because I saw some of your recipes, and it's something I've gotten into the last few years, and it just makes so much sense for canoeing, but also for backpacking. And you look at the price of one of these dehydrated meals is $10 or $15. Can you tell us a little bit, or maybe just share some tips about dehydrating when you're doing a longer trip?
Well, very important to have a large dehydrator to do great quantities of food, and always try to buy fresh food. So we always scour markets and local areas, farmers markets and things like that, to buy our fresh food. When we do process the food, we usually use a grater. So the smaller the product on the trays on the dehydrator, the better.
With consistency.
Yeah. So, and start early, because there's a lot of food to dehydrate. So we've done everything from spaghetti sauce to carrots to beef jerky. It's very time consuming, but it's worth it.
Oh, it's worth it.
It's a lot lighter to carry, and it dehydrates well. And once you have a good variety of vegetables and fruit and different kinds of things that you love to eat, then once you dehydrate it, you can kind of create all these different meals at camp.
Spice it up,
and our meals at the beginning were really bad, but towards the end of the trip, they were actually
pretty creative,
pretty good.
Is there one meal you think back of like, oh, that's the best meal we did?
We have a pasta dish that we really enjoy, and it's with dehydrated peppers, olive oil. We even dehydrated olives and sun-dried tomatoes and things like that we would put into it. And that was probably our favorite meal.
That's very nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That does sound good. Thinking back on the trip, is there a moment or just like a feeling you'd regularly get that really defines the trip for you?
A couple of moments. One was when we started start the trip in 2017, we took our granddaughter, our eldest granddaughter, who was 8 at the time, and she spent the first 4 days with us down the Ottawa River. And then we had her parents pick her up. But, that's something that will stick with her for the rest of her life. And I think we had great satisfaction in taking a youngster and experiencing that with them. But at the end of that first day, we'd only completed, I think, 10 kilometers. And I thought to myself, well, we only have 8,490 more kilometers to go. Then at the end of the trip, 3 years later, coming back to that same location, I just kept replaying in my mind what we had experienced over the past 3 years. Our granddaughter was waiting for us on the shoreline where we had started, actually a little ways before we finished, and we picked her up and crossed the finish line with her to complete the journey. But we both had extreme memories, good memories of events that took place, and yet we could write a book on. If we could write a book on the things that we've done. It's just amazing. You've not truly seen Canada until you've seen it from the water.
Yeah, it once you're out for a couple of weeks and you've got the rivers in front of you and these huge, massive lakes like Lake Superior and the Northumberland Strait, paddling on the ocean, you get a sense of freedom. We never had a plan in place. We just got up and then we just, decided when we were going to leave, and it was just the open water for us, or the open road if we were portaging. But you get an incredible sense of freedom, and you kind of forget about everything except for, enjoying nature and enjoying the moment, being in fresh air. We were fortunate to have great weather, so we really appreciated every day.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a great sense of accomplishment when you do that.
I think just having the freedom is, I do a lot of backpacking trips, and really, you don't have the phone, you don't have the schedule. And the best part is when you don't even have, a place to go. In Canada, you have to kind of book your backcountry campgrounds, but in parts of Europe, you can just go walk, and, there's a mountain hut every 2 or 3 hours, and you don't necessarily know where you're even going to go. And there's just a sense of freedom to have nowhere to go, but you're going somewhere. I'm really interested in your lake canoeing, because I've always been under the impression that canoeing in the Great Lakes is, really difficult with waves and whatnot. I have no idea, though. This is just things I've picked up. Is it a challenge to canoe in Lake Superior? Was it a challenge to deal with the weather and the waves?
On the larger bodies of water, Richard, you really have to be aware of the weather. Lake Superior, it's a vast lake. It's extremely cold. If you do capsize, hypothermia could set, even in the summer, hypothermia could set in within minutes. But you have to be respectful of the weather. The weather is forever changing. And of course, with wind, the weather, waves. So you have to be ready to react and know where you can take safe harbor at a moment's notice. But we had our canoe, it was a 17 and a half prospector configuration, but we had it outfitted for the trip with a splash deck, North Water splash deck. And we're glad we had it. It repelled some of the bigger waves and gave us a little protection from the wind when we were on the water. And of course, it encapsulated our gear. Big water versus rivers, quite a different paddling experience, but something that is most enjoyable.
And then with every different body of water, for example, the ocean, you're canoeing on swells, so you're getting used to the motion of the swell. So you adopt a paddling technique that's beneficial for that water activity. And then on small lakes, it's just or shallow lakes like Lake Winnipeg. It's a shallow lake, so the waves are shorter and closer together, and that is just harrowing to paddle through. Um, and then, of course, rivers are different again, and currents, coming from rivers into lakes. You always have to be wary of that as well, because that creates a whole different kind of challenge.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And Carol knows what she's talking about. She steered the canoe right across Canada. I was at the front with a big beaver paddle, doing the wheelhouse action, and Carol did the finesse and the steering, and really good navigator.
I think canoeing, I've always done it with my wife, and it always is a good team. You have to work together, and it's actually really good just for communicating, because you're really having to work in tandem. And so I always think it's a good way to build a relationship and communication, because you have to listen to the other person, otherwise you're gonna capsize. Well, at least on whitewater.
Yeah, you can't get away from each other.
No.
Yeah, you really have to work as a team, and not every couple can do that. But Glenn and I are pretty compatible, much like you and your wife, Richard. And it's you really have to work as a team, and you can't, if you do have a problem, you solve it, because if you sink together, or swim together, or sink alone,
Yep, there you go.
basically. So it's very important to work out those little disagreements that you have.
On a journey like this that takes place over 3 years, was there a moment or moments where you just thought, is this worth it? What are we doing? Let's go do something else.
We're kind of committed to do this because at the onset, we decided to do this as a fundraiser. We thought others should benefit. If we were going to enjoy the trip, others should benefit. So we did raise funds and awareness for a local hometown charity. So we had that pressure uh, behind us that all these people were wanting us to succeed and push on. But aside from that, I I don't think I would give it up for anything. It was fun. Even the days that weren't fun, I kept saying to Carol, "Let me know if we're not having fun, and we'll turn around and paddle back home." But it was fun. It was a good experience.
Yeah, I think you just have to have a passion for the outdoors. You have to have a passion for paddling, and doing adventures like that. And we're by no means experts or anything like that. We just saw the journey, and we had a little bit of determination, and took one day at a time. And it's amazing what you can do when you put your mind to it. Even at our age, at 60, it's you don't have to be 16 to do this. You can, if you're healthy, and if you
Able to
have the
do it,
right
yeah.
mindset, then you can do whatever you put your mind to.
I see people that they all often say, "Well, I'm too old to go try backpacking, or I'm too old to go on a walking tour." Or, I've seen people that have run 800 kilometers across the Alps, and they were in their 80s. And I remember I was struggling into a hut, and all of a sudden, this 80-year-old guy, and the first thing he does, he lights up a cigarette,
Yeah.
and and you just think, well, if this guy is going to be able to run across the Alps, I sure as heck can walk across them. Um, but it is, yeah, we all have these preconceptions is, oh, well, now you have to, go on a cruise and, kind of be sedate. But if you want to do it, you just have to have the desire and be pragmatic and prepared, and you can do anything.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're too early in life to put our slippers on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then paddling across Canada too, or portaging, something that stands out in my mind is the kindness and generosity of fellow Canadians. It was something that we never really expected, but it was amazing, the people that reached out to us, and
Yeah.
they invited us into their homes, complete strangers. Someone even gave us their car to go and buy groceries downtown, and
The amount of trust there. But I mean, how are we gonna get away? We just got a canoe, right?
But still,
It was wonderful.
very heartwarming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Carol, Glenn talked a little bit about what he was thinking coming into to Kingston at the end. But what were you feeling at the end of this? Your last day paddling paddling to complete this journey?
I was happy to finish paddling across Canada, but then on the other hand, it was kind of, bittersweet because I didn't really want it to end. I wish we could have kept going, basically, but it was an incredible sense of accomplishment. Something that we set out to do that we actually did, and all the experiences made me grow more as a person, I think, and made me not be overwhelmed by perhaps the little things of life anymore, and be more. Um, I don't know. You can cut that out in the video.
It honestly, there's this feeling, and talking to other people who do long journeys, there's this feeling when you're done where you've changed, but you don't know how you've changed, or you feel like when you're on a trip, you're going to have this great realization, and you end up, day after day, week after week, month after month, you never have that realization, but when you're done, something's happened, but you don't know what, but your life is changed, and it's hard to explain or put into words. So I can sympathize, because I still don't know how to put that into words either.
Yeah, perfect. Because people do ask us that, and you have changed a bit. Not really, but you can't really put it into words. What's changed? Sure, there's that sense of accomplishment, but you know, it makes you feel good inside to be able to experience nature like we did and become more aware of our surroundings and the environment.
And I think in some of the situations that you are put into on a long trip, and you overcome them, and then when you get back into the real world, things don't seem so monumental. So they're not a big issue or something to worry about or fret about.
That is a perfect way to explain it, because you're right. You have a major issue. Your canoe goes down the river, or we talked to one fellow. All his food, his cooking gear got stolen, and he was in the middle of nowhere. That's something that's really hard to solve. But most stuff day to day is annoyances, or things we have to deal with, but they don't have an impact of, oh, I might go hungry, or I might not be able to, my life might be at risk. Um, so you guys, you don't characterize yourself as experts. I would say after canoeing across Canada, I will characterize you as canoeing experts. So what's one big tip? So someone who's thinking of, they're doing a bit of paddling, they want to do a longer trip. What's your number one tip for somebody who's going to go do their first longer canoe trip?
I would say that you don't look at the big picture, but enjoy the moment that you're experiencing every day. Uh, if you can do that trip and don't feel that you're on a time restricted mode or a work mode where it's 9 to 5 and you're structured that way, but just let it go and enjoy the moment and take what life, what the adventure throws at you, and absorb it and enjoy it.
And I think also being very well prepared makes a big difference too. Having your food dehydrated, make sure that you have the right equipment. We did a lot of research into, what kind of tent we needed for a longer trip, what kind of environment we were going to paddle through, whether it was hot or dry or rainy. You have to have a great raincoat. Don't get wet. You'll just get too cold and exposed, and that could lead into trouble. Get off the water when it gets too rough.
When you don't feel comfortable, don't go.
I think that's a big one.
Be safe, yeah.
Even if you're on a timeline and you need to do 20 kilometers that day, if you get into a tight situation with high waves starting to cap, just get off the water. It's not worth the risk of capsizing or losing all your stuff, all your food and camp equipment in the middle of nowhere. So it can happen.
Yeah.
But uh, being prepared for that makes a big difference. It'll give you peace of mind.
And excellent. I think that's a really good message. It's, on one hand, be prepared and be safe. On the other half, savor every moment. Don't get into hitting agendas or metrics. I really enjoyed hearing about your trip and gaining this insight, and it makes me want to get out in the water here this summer once all the snow's gone, but it's still snowy. Thank you very much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you, Richard, for letting us talk.
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. It's our pleasure.
And if people want to learn more about your trip or some of your tips on dehydrating, they can go to www.canoeforchange.ca. There's lots of really great photos and more information about the trip, and also some great tips for kind of backcountry or canoeing meals. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. If you liked it, why not give us a review? Better yet, subscribe and get inspired again and again. Also, if you want to find your own adventures, why not check out 10adventures.com, where you can use our free resources to plan your own trip or book a tour in over 60 countries and make your own epic memories on your next adventure.